My name is Greg Remke. I work with economic thinking, and we do workshops on the economics of debate topics. We have online resources as well, and I am sort of recording a brief sort of overview presentation on the economics of foreign aid that I'm arguing is relevant for the two of the proposed NCFCA topics on development assistance for Latin American countries and humanitarian assistance for sub-Saharan African countries. So mostly I'll just be referencing books, online resources, and some of the economic principles involved. So U.S. federal government provide development assistance. This is substantially increased development assistance to one or more of the following: Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, so Central American countries. U.S. has a long, complicated history with each of these countries, with economic development in the banana industry, for example, as well as lots of foreign aid over the decades, as well as military intervention. So it's a complicated topic. It's also tied in with immigration issues as caravans come of people trying to ask for asylum in the U.S. as refugees, given the violence in these countries and the turmoil. So it's a fascinating topic, a relevant one that involves history, U.S. Central American history, economics, and political issues, development issues. And so what sort of humanitarian assistance what sort of development assistance could we provide to these countries, and how might we best do that? For the other resolution, it's U.S. federal government substantially increase humanitarian assistance to one or more countries in sub-Saharan Africa, helping people that are dealing with a drought, violence, you have locusts, other sorts of disasters in sub-Saharan Africa. And again, U.S. has been involved providing foreign aid for decades and decades. I actually drafted a resolution on this topic to be a national debate topic for the Public School League in the 1980s. And it has been a topic many times for in the Public School League. It was also, I think, was related to a STOA resolution a couple years ago as well, and I'm drawing some of my overheads from that. So we had a debate workshop on economic freedom and reforming foreign aid, and this was held at a college in Oregon, Salem, Oregon, a couple years ago. And again, drawing from the economic overview that I provided at that time, that one was the U.S. federal government should substantially reform its foreign aid, so a more general program policy than the two proposed here. So at the first one, development assistance for Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, somewhat similar to a 2013-14 NFL or NSDA now topic on calling for more economic engagement with Cuba, Venezuela, and Mexico. So I have a study guide on that, workbooks on that. Of course, Cuba, Mexico, and Venezuela are not Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. But many of the development ideas are similar. Many of the challenges in these Latin American countries are similar. The lack of sound institutions that protect rule of law, enterprise, property titling are a real challenge. And it's critics say foreign aid makes the problem worse. So how might we provide development assistance from the U.S. federal government that doesn't commit the problems or make the mistakes that past development seems to have done? And again, it's a great topic to debate. There's lots of important issues, very relevant for the U.S. Immigration and refugee policy, because these tend to be dysfunctional countries that are leading huge numbers of people to leave to escape poverty and violence. So the sub-Saharan Africa topic, again, this was a topic in the public schools some years ago, calling for more public health assistance for sub-Saharan African countries. This one, your resolution proposed humanitarian assistance. So what is humanitarian assistance? How does it get provided by the U.S.? I'll be talking about that. One of the resources, so we have a study guide on that topic, drawing from various books on development economics. And there was a big debate at the time between, and there still is, between sort of the rock star economist Jeffrey Sachs, whose book, The End of Poverty, proposed massively increasing U.S. foreign aid to jumpstart African villages out of poverty. This was profiled in Vanity Fair, and Bono and other stars were involved in this process during the Bush administration. Skeptical of those programs is William Easterly, his book, The White Man Burden, Elusive Quest for Growth, and others on this issue. Mohammed Yunus is looks at micro-lending as his approach, and Hernando de Soto with The Mystery of Capital, looking at the problems with informal economy and the lack of legal systems that allow the poor access to the legal system. More on this topic you can get from Poverty Inc. and Poverty Cure, are programs looking at the economics of poverty and focusing on the importance of small and medium-sized enterprises in particular, arguing that foreign aid often unintentionally undercuts domestic companies that are trying to provide goods and services. You know, it's hard to make money as a farmer if the U.S. agricultural programs are dumping food surpluses, you know, just when your harvest is coming in. But again, lots to debate on these issues. I recommend both Poverty Inc. and Poverty Cure websites and the online resources they provide. Poverty Inc. is a documentary, and it's available on, I believe, Netflix and Prime and other sources online. So now I'll go through just some other related ideas to the topic. So if I were to give a regular economic thinking workshop, it's economic freedom, development, and foreign aid. The general theme is you need sound economic institutions that allow human flourishing in enterprises. There's no reason people in Africa should be as poor as they are. Africans in America are prosperous. Their average income is higher than Americans that are not from Africa or the Caribbean. So why is that? Why have Africans flourished, in Europe and America, but struggle when they stay in Africa? I'm the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Global Economics, where we look at some of these international economic issues. In my workshops, I talk about poor economics. The authors here won the Nobel Prize recently in development economics, and they have a research agenda to try and figure out what works and what doesn't in foreign aid programs. I mean, just test programs and see how they work. Bed nets, for example, for helping protect people from malaria in sub-Saharan Africa. Is it better to give away the bed nets or to sell them, through have African business people sell them to the poor? And, we don't know the answer to that, so they test it. They try and figure out which one works best. This is the Poverty Cure DVD cover here. And then a book by Christopher Coyne, Doing Bad by Doing Good, looks at how many of our well-intended foreign aid efforts have backfired and the economic reasons why they backfired, the perverse incentives created. William Easterly's more recent book, The Tyranny of Experts, looks at how the development experts, along with governments, really are taking away rights from the poor and making their life worse in many ways, because development experts have a plan. Poor people have to do what the plan says, otherwise they don't get the money, and that's a real challenge. My Economics in a Cloud website is not up, but the other one should be available. So, overview of foreign aid, again, USFG development assistance or humanitarian assistance. I argue every debate topic's a history topic. We've got 50 years plus of development assistance and humanitarian assistance, which programs worked, which didn't, and why. That's something that students can research. Mystery of Capital is a great resource. Why does capitalism seem to work in creating prosperity in the United States, Western Europe, Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, but somehow hasn't worked the way it should have in Latin America? So that's a bit of a mystery. Public choice and public policy, the role of special interests. I talk about that in my workshops. William Easterly, the development economist, has a theme he presents over and over is the planners versus the searchers. When development experts come into Honduras and Guatemala, El Salvador, or they come into sub-Saharan African countries, they come in with plans, a plan to improve transportation, or a plan to help farmers, or a plan to redistribute land, or one plan or another. Those are not what created wealth in Western Europe, Japan, the Asian tigers. Instead, it was more entrepreneurs, the searchers, people who were trying to figure out how to make money growing and selling food, how to make money providing transportation services, how to make money running schools. Many of the schools are sort of homeschool-like small private schools in sub-Saharan Africa, and the U.S. donates education dollars to the government, and they spend some of that money persecuting the private schools. So it's a weird sort of world, but the planners versus the searchers are entrepreneurs trying to solve problems. People get hungry, people need education, people need housing, people need electricity. Those are the searchers trying to solve those problems. People need clean water. The planners come in with a big plan for wind power, solar power for an African country, or some centralized water system, or a new education program. That's the conflict that Easterly emphasizes. He was 20 years with the World Bank, finding over and over that the programs they tried to make work wouldn't work. There's a great many stories, many books on this. Part of the challenge for both Africa and Latin America is geography, with disease and malaria and yellow fever and all these challenges that people had through history in Africa and Central America. Now, though, we have air conditioning, we have electricity, we have better transportation. Those people should be able to use these technologies to prosper, just like Americans in the American South have in the past 50 years. Demographics are a huge issue as well with the population profile. Various TED Talks I recommend. George Aite has an online education course about Africa economics. This is his TED Talk. It's 13 years old now, and he's contrasting the young entrepreneurs with the people that have been the dictators in various African countries since independence, 20, 30 years, and how the political factions are in the way of people trying to transform these countries. You can also find other trade versus aid, patient capitalism, Aid for Africa, various people on TED who are looking at these issues from a whole range of viewpoints. June Aranga is a young woman from Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, and she was actually a speaker at the debate topic we had, U.S.-Africa topic, 20 years ago or 17 years ago. June was a student at the time, and she traveled with me speaking at NCFCA tournaments on the economics of the topic, and then she did some documentaries for the BBC that have been shown. The Devil's Footpath is one, going through African trouble spots. Africa, Who's to Blame is another one she did with the former president of Ghana. Those parts of those should be available and highly recommended. Oh, and then there's a preview there you can watch. So your nuts and bolts working on foreign assistance, working with U.S. government programs. The challenge is U.S. government has a huge number of programs, 52 different sectors with funds available for all sorts of different things around the world. So when you go into their website and look at Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, you'll find a list of 50, 100, 200 separate programs that different agencies of the federal government are providing assistance through various NGOs to try and achieve particular goals. So you can get a background on which programs are out there already. Foreign assistance, these are the different agencies. So some from the Department of Commerce, Defense, Peace Corps, Transportation, you name it. There's a wide range of current aid programs. One reform might be to not have such an incredibly diverse competitive system of federal government. Maybe the USAID should do all this, or maybe the USAID should be reformed in a significant way. The Heritage Foundation, so conservative groups and libertarian groups, the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, AEI, and others have a number of policy studies proposing reforms of current U.S. foreign aid. So you could look at ones that are relevant for Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras in development assistance, what overhauls they propose, and similarly for humanitarian assistance in Africa. Interesting, I remember reading an AEI article on humanitarian assistance in Africa, trying to help educate people so they won't go into terrorist organizations. When they did a review of the study, it turned out it pushed people into terrorist organizations. It was the opposite of what they intended. So there's a lot of unintended things that happen in these programs that they try to fix. So Heritage says, how do we reform foreign aid for the 21st century to make it better fit American interests and be more effective? They say USAID should be completely restructured, and much of its tasks should be put in the State Department. Then the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which is part of the project that Jeffrey Sachs and the Bush administration pushed in a big way, and maybe the Clinton administration, these programs are problematic and should be reevaluated, and that's what this proposes from Heritage. On my economic thinking site, economicthinking.org, we have lots of articles and posts on these topics that I recommend. And again, I recommend Poverty Inc. and Poverty Cure for this. And also, if you want to dig into this topic, you should know more about development economics. You can take a course on development economics from Marginal Revolution University. These are presentations and overheads, nothing fancy, with Tyler Cowen and Alex Tabarrok, who are authors of a popular college textbook. And you can just go step by step. And this gives you a sort of an overview of how the field is seen by development economists and which are some of the challenges. And again, they're looking at peer-reviewed articles, college textbooks, and issues that are seen in development economics as relevant. And then how could U.S. policy be reformed to reflect the current thinking in development economics? And again, background and overview of it.